What is Pokemon? If you answered it's a game, then you would be correct. But could there be more to this game than meets the eye? To this question you may reassert, no, it's just a game, and a children's game at that. Drawing this conclusion aligns you with the consensus. In the past, I also shared this perspective. I mean, it seems like common sense, right? Well, it turns out Pokemon may be far more layered than we assumed. This can be assessed by referencing your own experiences. Think back for a moment. Have you ever experienced anxiety, rage, or bliss while playing Pokemon? If you answered yes to any of these, then I'd ask, why? Think about that. We do not experience strong emotions for trivial things. If you pay attention to your emotions, it becomes increasingly clear that Pokemon is not just a game. In this, I'll be illustrating how the various aspects of Pokemon, specifically competitive Pokemon, can be extrapolated to many aspects of real life. Let us begin by defining a game. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a game is a physical or mental competition conducted according to rules with the participants in direct opposition to each other. Based on this definition, Pokemon meets the criteria. Now, let's take it a step further. What are the overarching principles of Pokemon? Meaning, at the macro level, what constitutes a good performance? In Pokemon, performance is predicated on how well a player develops an outcome, establishes a plan of execution, acts on that plan of execution, and adjusts in real time. Simply put, performance is judged by how well a player overcomes obstacles and wins. Now, let's look at life. To preface, this is not an existential examination. The focus is on life's physical plane, everyday life. We often hear life referred to as a game, but why is that exactly? Certainly, people aren't making light of something so important. It's possible, but that's likely not the case. Life frequently receives this attribution because it too meets the criteria of a game. It has outcomes, rules, and opponents. That said, we can then ask what constitutes a well-played life. Most would agree that a well-played life is comprised of having a purpose, mission, passion, establishing a plan or plans to move forward towards it, executing, and adjusting in real time. Simply put, a well-played life is when a person fulfills their purpose despite the obstacles. They also share structural similarities. Both possess uncontrollable elements, are unfair, and require forward movement despite a lack of information. In Pokemon, these manifest in a variety of ways. A few include team matchups, random move effects, and critical hits. In life, these manifest through illnesses, car accidents, and bad weather. This list does not exhaust all the similarities nor all the examples. The aim is to highlight the parallels that may have been previously overlooked. Thus far, we've paralleled the performance requirements and structure. These are the built-in elements. With that, let's now examine how players impact this. Despite game structure being fixed, players produce incredibly dynamic hierarchies. Some do well, while some do not. Why is this? What differentiates players? In hierarchies, players are ordered by skill. How is skill determined? By win frequency. How is skill improved? Through practice. This process determines hierarchical positioning or rank. Of course, this is no secret. However, many players who desire ascension disregard this. If the process is so simple, then why do players avoid it? Ultimately, it boils down to fear. Fear of what? Fear of judgment. But who's judging? The results. People have a self-image. This is how they see themselves. This is often referred to as the ego. They do not like when it is judged negatively. The threat to this image feels like a threat to their existence. That said, how does this tie into the player hierarchy? Players who occupy the top of hierarchies fear judgment but act anyway. For some, failure represents a negative judgment. And where are these failures? In practice. Practice is laden with failure. It is less about making the correct decision and more about making the wrong decision and not repeating it. Knowing what to do is born of knowing what not to do. Experiencing failures repeatedly is a requirement. Often, they avoid the process altogether because the pain is too much to bear. Their results reveal exactly where they stand. It's an inescapable reality, the truth. One strategy, if that truth conflicts with the person's self-image, is to avoid the game. Avoid the ladder, avoid classes, avoid family, avoid people, avoid the mirror, all in an attempt to evade the pain. These things are now judges. How adversity is handled in Pokemon is a reflection of other areas. Avoidance is not the only way this issue is handled. Many players adopt strategies that assist in ego preservation. Everyone enters a game intending to win, however, not everyone gets that result. How results are processed massively impacts ranking. We touched on how fear prevents players from playing, so if after that they decide to act and still see no results, then what? How should the results be processed? Generally, after a result, players will draw one of four conclusions. 1. I'm bad or I'm good. 2. My opponent is bad or my opponent is good. 3. This game is bad. This game is good. And 4. My actions were effective or my actions were ineffective. Notice, 2 responses localize responsibility while 2 take no responsibility. Next, I'm going to explain the strengths and weaknesses of each conclusion. I'm bad or I'm good. These players identify with their results. They often refer to themselves as good or bad, and each result influences their self-image. They feel strong negative emotions when they lose repeatedly, and in some cases, relinquish responsibility through excuses. You may think this is an exaggeration, however, after a few bouts of self-awareness, reality quickly becomes unavoidable. How do you feel after repeated losses? Are you unfazed? Are your emotions responding as if this were trivial? Would you respond in this way after a game of tic-tac-toe? You're engaging in something meaningful. These emotions are not arbitrary. They are trying to communicate something. As a response, you may find yourself quitting or rushing to find another battle, all in hopes of reinstating your damaged self-image. This is unproductive. In life, identifying with your results is also risky. Throughout history, people have committed heinous acts to preserve their self-image. On a macro scale, recall incidents where people attach themselves to destructive ideologies that led to massive catastrophes. On a micro scale, recall the woman who refuses to accept her aging and thus continually receives cosmetic surgery. They share the same underlying belief system. I am this, therefore this must occur. I am this, therefore I must do this. I do this, therefore I am this. Such rigidity opposes reality. Rejecting reality in favor of your self-image will always lead to hardship. My opponent is bad or good. These players shift responsibility to their opponents. They also identify with their results, but point the finger everywhere else when they lose. They do this to protect their self-image. The possibility of a failure being a result of their incompetence is too great a threat. Accepting that reality may topple the fragile house of cards that is their ego. Attributing losses to the opponent alleviates them of all responsibility, so there's no reason to have to examine their past decisions. Excuses are not always false. A player's deflection might have truth to it. The opponent's ability may have contributed, but focusing on this is unproductive. Blaming results on external factors provides no room for improvement. Say instead, my opponent may have been good/bad, but how did I contribute to this? This brings attention to the things that can be improved, that can be controlled. In life, this is no different. It is alluring to blame circumstances for your shortcomings. They're more gifted, they're more athletic, they're more privileged, it's my dad's fault, my professor sucks. Like in Pokemon, this is unproductive. The excuses may be true, but they don't alter reality. Altering reality comes through taking responsibility for the hand life dealt. The game is good or bad. These players shift responsibility to the structure of the game. They identify with their results just like others, but take it a level higher. Rather than localizing the failure to their opponent, they extrapolate it to the game as a whole. It's not me, it's the game. It's not me, it's the metagame. It's not me, it's the team. They focus on their plight while ignoring players who perform well. This is arrogance. If the structure of the game was flawed, then no one would be consistently successful. Indeed, the game is far from perfect. The problem lies in choosing to play despite this knowledge. If the game is flawed, then stop playing. Blaming the game serves no purpose beyond deflecting responsibility. In this case, a player may not identify as good or bad. They likely identify as a competent person, but excuse poor results to maintain that self-image. Unfortunately, just like in Pokemon, this is unproductive. While it may be true that life is flawed, that still does not alter reality. Ignoring the cases that conflict with this conclusion impedes progress. Adopting personal responsibility while lessening the suffering of others is one way to combat this. Very few things feel better. If the game is going to be played, then play it well. Otherwise, it becomes a horrid, unbearable experience. This is not meant to be a comprehensive argument against nihilism. The hope is to provide a pathway forward. My actions are effective/ineffective. These players focus on their actions. They are not attached to the identity of a good player or a bad player. Instead, they ask if they played well or not. In doing so, losses have little impact on their self-image. They still experience disappointment or regret, but these emotions are transient, which allows for reflection on mistakes. Instead, they identify as a learner, a person who views losses as learning opportunities. This approach is the best. It lessens emotional reactions while taking full responsibility. It provides the next step for improvement. Players cannot control the hacks, matchups, and uncertainty, but they can control their decisions. In accepting this, a player becomes unstoppable. Life is the same. When aiming for an outcome, we can only control our actions. tragedy may strike, emotions may flare, all hope may seem lost, but as long as we never let go of our desired outcome, we can move forward. We can always recalibrate and maintain faith. This realization is the pathway to freedom. You may be thinking, this is ridiculous. This is a game designed for children that you're trying to stretch to mean something. This is a fair point. Pokemon initially was intended to entertain children through fictional monsters, and by and large, this is still the case. However, this is a discussion on competitive Pokemon, which is not the same. While there is no definite line for where childhood stops, most cultures would not classify anyone above the age of 14 as a child. Therefore, the majority of people who play competitive Pokemon are not children. Furthermore, competitive Pokemon is complex. It is more than throwing mythical monsters at each other. It is a game of strategy. It is not easy to perform well against competent players. There are complexities on the micro level such as EVs, IVs, natures, extending into the macro complexities like metagames. There is no evidence that this is characteristic of a children's game. Remember, Pokemon is having an outcome, establishing a plan, acting on that plan, and adjusting. Is it impossible for children to be good at this? I'd assume not. Child prodigies exist in many areas. But to then conclude that this is for children displays a lack of thinking, if not stupidity. For the last person thinking, okay, good points, but Pokemon says nothing about who I am. There is no proof. This is true. There is no proof. You decide what points to accept. I'm not here to force my propositions. This is suggestive. However, I will advise you to pay attention. Is it reasonable to assume that these mindsets only manifest in Pokemon? If so, why? Do you believe practicing these unproductive thought patterns have no impact outside of Pokemon? If so, why? Where did these negative mindsets come from? Why make excuses over something trivial? If you answer these questions honestly, it becomes obvious that there is no hard line between the two. There's no turning it off. Circumstances do not make the man. They reveal him to himself. Pokemon does not cause you to make excuses. It exposes you. It reveals what is dormant. Even if you pick an alternative, in hard times, the same patterns will emerge. I used to hear the saying, everything bleeds into everything. At the time, I didn't understand, but now it makes perfect sense. If you watch yourself during difficulty, you'll see the truth. You cannot avoid yourself. If you want to overcome this, you must face it. Find a battle. There is no other antidote. If you only play for fun, cool, ignore this. This is for the competitors, for those who enjoy winning. The next time you encounter unfairness, go ahead. Rage, swear, cry. But when your temper tantrum is over, take a look at your mistakes. Realize that you can do better. Realize it is all a part of the game.